Now, if you see here, we have a error here. Each child in an array or iterator should have a unique key prop. What does it say? Well, it says that whenever you render a list, basically an array of components or of elements, it should have a prop called key. Now, why is that necessary? Well, for precisely the reason that I talked about before, which is that reconciliation step. If you do not provide a prop to a list, React is then not able to use that very clever algorithm that it uses to see what minimum change it needs to do. So if you don't use the key prop, what React will do is just re-render the whole thing and not do the reconciliation step. So that's why, so it's inefficient to not use a key prop on the product. So I'll just provide it a key prop, and the key has to be unique. So in this case, the product ID is a unique prop, and that's what I'm passing, and the error should now disappear. All right. How is it going so far? Is it, there's a lot of chat going on there. Extends React component. Yeah, okay, so is the message getting across? Are you, learning at least something? How are you feeling? Well, really good to know. Good to know. Okay, so that's reconciliation, and that's okay. So there's a question. If you have questions, I'd like you to ask them in the Q&A section, but I'll answer this question, which is, I noticed that there's no commas in your object. Is that new syntax? Yeah, that is a new syntax. It's actually a syntax in ES6. In classes, you don't have to use commas, and you don't have to, you just have to, this is another syntax, new syntax, which is, I'm not using any properties. I'm just saying handle click. Well, that's a function. So if it has parentheses, it's a function. So these two are new syntaxes. And of course, this whole class thing, you can think of it as just using the pseudo-classical pattern. So that way, I think it's pretty easy. And this is the constructor. So you can think of it that way. But that doesn't have super well. Well, let's say it's calling this React.component here in the context of this object. So that's basically the translation of class into pseudo-classical pattern. All right. So that's a product list. Now, what we have in this completed application, we have a header. The header contains a heading and a cart. And when I add to the cart, well, something gets added. So now let's try to take care of that. So let's have a header component. Function header. And it takes props. It doesn't have to, but maybe it will need at some point. And let's go to the static version of this the page, and it has this is the header, right? So let's copy this header and let's get rid of this, and let's return that as JSX. So, but the first thing that you want to do always is rename class to class name. And, but nothing happens because I haven't rendered it and I haven't used this header so far. Where do I want to use it? Well, let's have a whole component. What is this? This is one component. this is another component, product list. This is header. This is another product component. And the whole app, we can just call it a shop component or shop container or something. But let's call it just application. We can even call it application, but just I will call it just shop. So function shop, because that's a root component. And it returns, what does it return? Well, it returns two more components, one of which is a header, this component, and another is product list. It's composed of two components, this component and this component. So let's return that. Header, actually, okay, so that's one. So you'll see a problem here that we'll talk about, and the other component is product list. Right, now let's see what happens to our application. Well, there's a problem. Must be wrapped in an enclosing tag. So this is important to remember. Every JSX or every component only returns one element, and that element can have nested elements inside of it, right? So what can we do here? Well, div, and let's copy those and paste them here. Let's see. Looks like we don't have a header. Why is that? Return header. Okay. Okay. So, okay, header returns header component. Let's actually look at the markup. What a markup I have. Oh, well, what I'm doing here is that I'm rendering product list. So this should be the store component because that's the root component that we have now. So let's see what happens now. Well, there's another error, which is store is not defined. Shop, oh, okay, it's shop. Right, okay, and header and product lists, let's see. Okay, now it renders this. But I don't have, this is just static markup, right? And let me see the chat at the bottom. Okay, right. Okay, so this is just, again, just hard-coded data and hard-coded strings. We want to be able to render something else depending on what the card has. So we are presented with another piece of state in our application. One piece of state is the products, right? That's one piece of state. Now we have another piece of state, which is cart items. So our cart has items, right? So what we can do is basically copy this and turn it into a new component, cart, because that has to be a new component because it's a logical thing to do. And let's create that as a component. Function cart extends, okay. Right, so it takes props, and what does it return? Well, it returns that precise markup that I copied there, but I also want to use that component here and create an element out of it, React element. Okay, so let's see. Yep, it works. But we still don't have the state that's associated with cart, which is, we'll call that cart items. And we want to be able to add to that state. Checkout is actually removing all the cart items, so we want to be able to remove from that state. And so how do we do that? Well, we need a stateful component, but where should that state be? That's an important concept, an important thing to realize about React is deciding where your state should live. And it's not always easy, but here we can see, in this case, in the product list case, well, product list is just the easiest place for the product state to live, because product list, and these are products. So products belong to this component, right? And because the product component is a child of this component, you can easily just pass around methods that can call the methods on the product list component. So that's easy. Now in cart, what you have here is that you click this button in the product component and something has to change in the cart component, and they are not linked in any way. They're not linked in a child and parent relationship. So how do you pass that data? Well, what you do is you push the state up to the parent component of both these components. So what is the common parent of these two components? The cart and the product. The common parent of all these components is the actual store component or the shop component, right? So that is where we will have our state, because both product component and the cart component can interact with this component. So let's create a stateful shop component. So class shop extends react.component and render, and it basically renders this. Okay, and now it has state. So when it has state, you have to initialize initial state constructor. Again, super props. It's important to do. And this dot state. What is the state? Well, it's an empty array for now, because the cart doesn't have any items. And what we can do is decide inside the header. I can pass this state, this state. It has to be an object actually. What am I doing? If that state equals product, okay, cart items. That's the state, and an array. So that's an empty array. Okay, so what we can do here is pass that cart items to this child, which is header, and it can pass it to the cart items, the cart component. So this dot state dot cart items, right? Okay, so now header receives those as a prop, so it can say cart items props.cart items, and the cart gets those cart items. But if you look at this, you see that, well, you don't have a template for the case where the cart is not empty. This is only the template where the cart is empty, right? So we will actually do a conditional here and see if props.cart items dot length is 0, then do this, right? Because we don't have any cart items, so we want to return this. Else, return something else. What do you return? Well, I have a static version of that in a page with cart items. So let's go there. And this is the cart that I want to return. So cart, let's see, checkout and everything. Okay. Table, your cart, div cart. Okay, so this is it, right? Right, let's copy that and paste it here in application.js. So that's what we want to return in case there are cart items in this state that we have in the shop component, right? And what will happen is that, well, you might be wondering, will the update still happen because the state is inside the shop component? If I change the state with set state, how is this cart item going to be affected? Well, because in render, the header is passed the cart items from the state, right? And each time the set state function is called and the state is changed, this render will be called. And each time a different cart item will be passed to the header, and it will pass a different, the same to the cart, and that's why it will, as a result of changing the state here, the cart itself will be updated. So, okay, let's see if it works, first of all. Okay, so unexpected token function shop. Okay, let's see. Let's remove this. Okay, props is not defined. Application.js 30. Let's see. Okay. A valid reject element on null must be returned. Where is it? Shop.render. No, I'm not using that. This is the problem with using ES6 and ES7 at the same time. In ES6, sometimes you don't have to use a return statement. All right. So now let's check if this works. Now let's check if this changing the state somehow changes the view of this cart item. Well, looks like it does. You see? And there's some CSS issues. We can check them out later. I think, yeah, CSS issues because of the class name. So let's see. Class. And it will work now. All right. So I just added an empty object, and the cart picked it up, and the render function or the cart function checked it because that was passed as a prop. The cart item was passed as a prop, and since the length is not 0, so this JSX is returned and this is rendered to the DOM. Okay. Now let's actually use this to render use this cart items from the state to render here. And this is because this is just hard coded. I can simply replace this with cart items. Okay, not this, basically, okay, right here. What I can say is that whichever cart items I get as a prop, I'm going to map those to a table row. You see? Okay. Let's copy this. Okay, and each cart item, let's call it item, will have a title property on it, but we have to use curly braces, right? And it has a quantity property on it, item.quantity, and it has a price property on it, item.price. And that's all we need here. And we can basically just get rid of these table rows, because those will be automatically generated for us with this map. All right, so let's see if it works. Let's again change the state here and see what happens. There's an issue. Cart items is not defined. Well, where are cart items? Props.cart items, right? And this is the same error that we got before. And we can, the key error, we can just say here, key is item.id. We can use that. And yeah, we'll get rid of that error. But right now, the ID is just undefined because we don't have any cart items. And the other is about call span. So there's another thing that you can note is that React uses camel casing for some of these attributes. So instead of call span like this, you have to use call span like this. All right? Okay, we can take care of that later. Okay, so now we have this, and we see that it works. So let's remove the empty object here. What we actually want to be able to do is click here, and this product gets added to the cart. Now, how might we be able to do this? Well, let's go. The first thing, of course, is to add an event handler. Where? Inside the product. Add to cart. This button, when it clicks, I want you to call a function. And the function is, it will call a function passed in by the product list. Why is that necessary? Well, because as I said before, the state resides in the topmost element. So we have to pass in a callback from all the way to the bottom, which is product, and call it here when a click happens. And that causes a change in the store component, the shop component that we have. So that's a way of actually passing props from callbacks from parents to children elements. Right, so what is this? The function onClick function, and this will call a function props.on delete click, right? And what does it get passed? Well, the ID, of course, props.id. So this is the one that I want to add to the cart. And you can get rid of this one. Don't need this anymore. In product list, this has to pass this on delete click callback to product. So let's do that. On delete, okay, not on delete click, on add to cart click. Let's say on add to cart click. Okay, so on add to cart click, what do I want to do? Well, I want to call a function passed in by the parent of product list, because that's the only function that can change the state, right? Which is shop. Product list parent is shop. So I want to go all the way back to shop in order to be able to change the state. So, but what do I want to add to the state, right? So let's look at that. The things that I want to add are the item title, right? The quantity, but the quantity here is different. When I click this, quantity is now 2, right? It's not the same quantity as this quantity, so we have to keep that in mind. And price. So these are the 3 things that we need to pass to create a new cart item, okay? On add to cart click, and this has access here to that product that we want to add. That's exactly the same product that we want to add. All right, so on add to cart click, call props, this dot props dot handle, or on add to cart click. And we want to pass it an object that has an ID. ID is important. Product.id. ID is important to be used as a key. Title, product.title. And price, product.price. And quantity, actually, we don't want to pass in quantity because it's not the same quantity as this one. So this will be added to the carts, but who will add this? Well, this .props.on add cart click. So it assumes that this function is getting passed to it by the parent, and the parent in this case is of product list is what? The shop. You see, product list, and all right. So this let's pass that on add to cart click. Add to cart click. This dot handle add to cart click. This is where we want to handle it, right? Yes. Yeah. Okay. Handle add to cart click, and it takes an object which we want to add to the cart item. And let's see, this set state. What do we want to do? We want to add to it. So cart items are the previous cart items. This dot state dot cart items dot concat. Concat is basically what adds a new product to the end in this case. Okay. So concat what? Cart item. Let's see. Let's see if it works. Add to cart. It's not it. I think I have an error again. Title, product, price. Okay. I see what it is. Yep. Maybe I'll have some other errors too, but let's see. Props on add to cart is not a function. That's 133. This dot props dot on add to cart click on add to cart click. Okay. Where does this get passed? Well, in shop. I think this is a problem. Let's see. Cart items of undefined 38. Let's see that. Sorry for these so many errors. This that state. Cart items that state cart items. Concat cart item. Oh, actually I want to set state here too. Is that set state? Maybe not. Let's see here. What do I do in product list? Well, exactly that. Is that state products? Okay. And cart item is that state. Oh, I think this is a problem here. Dot bind this. That's the problem. So remember to do that. Line 38. Yeah, this is fine, I think. So let's see the new error. Cart item is not defined, application JS 38. Okay, let's see. Cart, oh, cart item. Wow. Okay. Now these warnings. Let's see. Warning states they cannot do a state even existing state transition. Right. So let's check this out, and I think I know where it's coming from, and not exactly where, but why it's happening. So let's see. Let's go through this and let's see what we are doing here. So the first thing is that when we click this, so we want to be able to call props.onAddToCartClick with the ID. We don't have to do that, but because the ID is already provided here, so we can just say props.onAddToCartClick without this. Okay, and on add to cart click. So this method is what's on add to cart click, and it calls the on add to cart click that is passed in from the store component, the shop component. On add to cart click, this dot handle add to cart click that binds. Okay, let's see now. Still having issues. Can't even access the inspect tools because I think the problem is that it's doing something. It's basically a loop, a never-ending loop, but I don't know how this is happening. Let's get rid of this. this call and see what happens. Not this one. Yep. Right. Something is not right. This tab and handler to cart click. And let's the host 3000. Oh, okay. This dot props on add to cart click is not a function, right? So so let's get rid of all of these callbacks. On add to cart click. And here on add to cart click. See if it works. Okay, so we are back to the old state, which is at least working. If it's not, let's see what the comment says. Not returning from function, maybe. Let's see. Okay, so let's try that again. This dot state is that state, all right? Cart items, and handle add to cart click. Okay, so that's what I want to pass in. Handle, okay, on add to cart click. What you want to do is call this this dot handle add to cart click dot bind this. Okay, so far so good. Handle add to cart click. Now let's go to product list. Okay, and where's product list? Yeah, I'm using bind this, so that's fine. And on add to cart click, this dot props dot on add to cart click. So that's another function, but I want to be able to pass it some props, an object, and that object has to have an ID, which is product.id, and the title, which is product.title. So now, for now, let's just check these two, and okay. And add to cart. So on click, on add to cart click. Props dot on add to cart click. This is the function that I want to get called. Let's see now. I can. within render and another. How am I calling set state within render? Is this happening somewhere? I bet this is So now I need to go click that behind this. Let's see, set state cart items, and it's not getting called in render somewhere. So where is it getting called? Actually, let's just not waste too much time on this, because I have an application that I've already built, the same application that I built today, basically, and I'm having troubles with it. But so let's just see that and how I've implemented that, and we can just get an idea of how I pass the function prop from parent to child, and it changes the state in the component, and then re-renders according to that state. So let's see. Shopping cart completed, atom. Let's open that. Okay, so I think this is an inexplicable bug for me right now, and the page is also not responding. So let's see the actual code that I actually written here. So basically the same thing. It's store extends React.component, and what it's doing is handle add to cart click is a function that we will talk about this function later, but it's getting past that function as a prop to product list on add to cart click, right? And the same thing that we did with the unsuccessful attempt. So that's what's happening here. And now let's see in product list what's happening. In product list, what's happening is that that same function on add to cart click that's being passed from the store is getting called with this ID, title, and price. And right. Oh, so I wasn't actually, it's probably bind this was the problem here. Maybe I wasn't binding it correctly. Anyway, with that ship has sailed, I think. So, so this, I call it here, and that same method that is getting passed from the parent. And then this function that's getting passed like right here is actually called here on add to cart click. So this is an important thing in React, passing around functions to children objects, child components, in order to update state or do something else in a parent component, and that's the only way you can actually update state. So if the state resides in a parent element and some action has to change that state, but that action occurs in ways down in the child element, that's the only way using pure React that you can do that, passing around functions. All right, so what does this function do? Well, this function basically says, there's a little bit of a complex function, but says that if that, so let's see the behavior. The behavior is this. This is the behavior, right? Add to cart. So it already exists. The quantity was increased to 3. And if I add to cart, well, if it does not exist, just add it with the quantity of 1, right? So that's the behavior that we want to do, want this component to do. So it sees if it already exists. If it exists in the cart items, it sets the state to object. You see object.assign item quantity item.quantity plus 1. So it actually adds to the quantity. It doesn't do anything else. If it does not exist, it actually adds the cart item, the new cart item that's passed in from the child component, and adds it to the cart items. So when that this set state function is called and this is updated, what happens is that the render method is called. And I said, as I said previously, when the render method gets called, these new cart items are pushed down to the children. And that's how the DOM gets updated, but in a very intelligent and smart way, not in just a naive way of just re-rendering the whole DOM. So yeah, that's that functionality. And then the same we can do with checkout, basically. So checkout is when we click checkout, well, the cart becomes empty. So how do we do that? We have in product, we have in cart, simple here. It's very simple component. In cart, we just have this function, this button checkout, right? And we want to actually remove, to reset the cart items to empty array when this checkout button is clicked. So how do we do that? Well, on click this .props.on checkout click. On checkout click is actually passed in from header, right? And where does header get it from? Well, header gets it from the store. And you see here on checkout click. And checkout click, and this is the function that actually gets called. And what it does is set the state to cart items an empty array. And when the state is updated like this, again, what happens is the render method gets called, and the whole DOM is actually updated. So I'm sorry for that problem that happened. I don't know why I wasn't able to figure it out, but yeah, it happened. And but the point of this is not to actually be able to. The point of this application, this presentation here, is not to be able to actually go on and build React applications. This is just to give you a taste of how React handles a few of the issues that front-end development has, like the very expensive DOM renders and imperative code and stuff like that. And so this is just hopefully giving you a taste of that, and hopefully you are interested to know more about React and learn more about this. So we talked about React components, and we talked about the virtual DOM, which is what I said is the virtual DOM. When a render method is called, the previous value of that render method is compared with the current DOM tree, and if there are any changes, the changes are made in the actual DOM in a very intelligent way. So that's the virtual DOM that takes care of that and reconciliation. And apart from that, we have things that we didn't cover, and of course that are very important for actual real world applications of API calls and synchronicity, forms in React. So API calls, actually interfacing with the server and using the server data and how that affects the state and how that affects the complexity of the application. Forms in React, well, forms are another important topic. How React handles forms and the various types of components that have forms, controlled components and uncontrolled components. That's an important aspect that we didn't cover. Redux is of course important because it's not a React specific library, but it's used in conjunction with React to actually. So what does it solve? It actually solves this problem of having to pass around these callback functions from parents to child and so on. That's tedious and that's problematic. Redux allows us to have, actually gives us a better and more centralized way of handling state. Okay, routing is another aspect that you can explore in your own routing, front-end routing, client-side routing is important as well. And so what are other learning resources? Well, learning resources for React are the React documentation, of course, itself. And I'm a book person. I like to read books. So these books I found to be useful books: React Quickly and Full Stack React, the complete guide to React.js and Friends. So you might want to check those out. And so that's the presentation basically. Let's see the chat. Okay, so any questions that you have? I know I bottled it up somewhat, but well, it happens. Let's see. Do you ever use jQuery? Well, jQuery and React are, very different beasts. jQuery is actually manipulating the DOM itself, and that's something that React does for you. So jQuery and React in that way are very, kind of the opposites of each other. React handles DOM manipulation for you, and in jQuery you have to do that DOM manipulation. That's more imperative, jQuery. But sometimes you kind of have to. I was developing an application which had to do some drag and drop, and there are ways to do it without having to use DOM manipulation. But I think in those situations you have to use jQuery and the like. How does traditional models, collections, and views translate in React application? Well, that's model views and controllers and collections, etc. That's a completely different way of developing application. That's an old way of, not an old way, but that's a much older style of programming and style of programming UI applications specifically. So I don't know, what do you mean by, how does translate in React application? What does that exactly mean, actually? So those are two really different approaches to UI development, basically. Any other questions? Yeah, you can say it's declarative. It's more declarative, but MVC can also use declarative code. So declarative is, more a broader concept than MVC. It's not that they are each other's alternatives. They're not, but it's a component style of, it's a UI library. I don't think there is a specific paradigm that you can, pin it into. But yeah, declarative style is a good word to use. Yeah, if that's it, you can also ask me questions on Slack. You can just ping me if you have any questions. Right now, if you don't have any other questions, I think that's it. An introduction to React, and yeah, thanks for joining me.